Thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm very happy to host one of my coworkers, Ngosong Fonkem, who is currently in my home state of Wisconsin. We're going to talk a little bit today about his career path and the things that are on his radar as an international trade lawyer. Ngosong, so happy to have you on the Legal Lunch Byte today.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for inviting me to the show.
So let's talk about your background. You are an international trade lawyer. That's different from me as an international transactions lawyer. So please tell everyone what you do and what's interesting about your practice.
I primarily advise individuals and companies on how to navigate domestic and foreign legal issues and the management of geopolitical risk from an import-export perspective. And I like to emphasize political risk because the ripple effects of any political event extends far beyond the immediate occurrence. So understanding and anticipating of political risk is not only a business strategy, it's also a survival skill. And it's only when you're able to understand the policy driving the law, it is then that you're able to anticipate where things are headed from a trade perspective. And then you can begin to put processes in place to manage the risk and the impact on your business and to be able to adapt, survive, and thrive in a very turbulent environment.
That's great. And so in terms of typical clients for you, I know we've talked about the energy producers, those involved in global shipping. What are some of your typical clients and what kinds of issues are you helping them with on the global stage?
They vary. I would say it typically is driven by geopolitical events. I know at the tail end of 2017, with the Trump administration coming to office and imposing a number of tariffs on China, I had a lot of domestic clients as well as foreign clients wanting to know how they could sort of navigate the tariffs regime, as well as find creative ways to mitigate paying duties. And then as a result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, with the United States and a number of Western companies imposing a number of trade restrictions on Russia, again, a lot of Russian clients, a lot of foreign clients from South Africa reached out to me to help them sort of navigate U.S. sanctions regime and those of the European Union and the UK. And then I have a fairly robust shipping practice, basically due to my background, having had a law degree in Admiralty and Maritime Law at Tulane Law School, as well as working as an oil and gas energy consultant in Southeast Asia. So as a result of that, I've been able to sort of leverage some of those experience to get a number of clients, ship owners, as well as NVOCC that are shipping lots of products overseas. So in a nutshell, that's sort of what I do.
That's great. So what are some of the biggest risks that should be on everyone's radar for companies that are engaged in global trade? I mean, we've got definitely have the U.S. election this year. I know India is in an election right now. What are some of the other areas of this geopolitical risk that you're focused on right now?
I think the ongoing geopolitical tension between the United States and China for global leadership in economics and technology is an area that we should be watching very closely. And this tension is cleaving global supply chain, at least I believe it is, into two, with the United States on the one hand and the Chinese-led supply chain on the other hand. So what it means is that if you are a company involved in international trade, cross-border trade, there are a few areas of risk that you should be watching very closely. And the key being for any American investor is any investments that rely on Chinese manufacturing, Chinese technology. And under this new environment, you now need to be able to look at your supply agreements, your operational practices, to make sure that they comply with the United States and partner countries' labor and environmental standards. Now, if you have significant operations in, let's say, China, let's say you are a Teslas of the world, your Apples of the world, you also then would need to balance your obligation to comply with US law against your obligation to comply with Chinese law, or otherwise you run the risk of being dinged by China's side retaliatory tariffs as well as sanctions. And to take things, just to put things into perspective, looking at the forced labor law, for example, we claim that China is forcing its ethnic minorities into slave labor camps, and we passed a law that bans U.S. companies from doing business with Chinese companies that are domiciled in the Xinjiang region, which is where the Uyghur minorities live. And the law also, we also ban American companies from doing business with companies that are sourcing from that region. Now, China obviously disagrees with our allegation, and they have gone one step further, and they've passed a law to essentially protect their domestic industry by giving those companies, Chinese companies, the right to sue foreign companies that forgo doing business with them due to this ban. And the law also makes it a criminal offense for the Chinese companies who forgo. Now you can see that as a result of this conundrum where doing business with one company, well, how difficult it now may become to comply with one country's trade laws when doing so would cause you to break another country's trade laws. So that's a major risk.
Right, stuck between a rock and a hard place, depending on which side you're lined up in. That's so fascinating, and of course, I follow China quite a bit as well. But it's fun to hear the issues from your perspective as opposed to my perspective. It's very, very interesting. So let's turn topics for a second to the ongoing war in the Middle East. I know this is on everyone's mind. A lot going on with Iran attacking Israel just a day or two ago. And then we have, even before that, we have the Houthi firing missiles on U.S., U.K., and Israeli ships. What impact is that having on U.S. trade? I mean, there are, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but there aren't that many critical trade corridors in the world, and it seems like there are issues with all of them right now. At least, whether they're kind of low simmering issues, or whether you take the Middle East, it's much more of an explosive situation.
That is a very important issue, Jonathan, because normally about 12% of global trade passes through the Red Sea, the Suez Canal. But due to the ongoing issue in the Middle East and the Houthis effectively imposing an effective blockade on the Red Sea, that's causing major shipping companies to reroute their business operations away from the Suez Canal around the Cape of Good Hope, Africa, into predominantly Western Europe. So if you just think about it, if you have you're a local manufacturer here in the United States and you have a piece of equipment on one of those ships, that could essentially cause you to delay your manufacturing process, or perhaps even shutter altogether. Bearing in mind that the additional travel from the Cape of Good Hope to the intended destination adds about 10 to 30 days, given the speed of the ship, as well as the destination of the ship. Now, that is not only impacting Europe, Asia trade, but also U.S. Asia trade, because a lot of the ships, the cargo that services the east coast of the United States, typically would go through the Suez Canal, the Mediterranean Sea, the Atlantic Ocean, and then service the port of Baltimore, which is going through some trouble right now, New York Port, Norfolk, Virginia, Miami, etc., etc. Now, with the situation in the Middle East escalating over the past 15 days or so, that adds a new dimension to the disruption, keeping in mind that about 40% of global trade in oil supply goes through the Strait of Hormuz, which is de facto controlled by Iran. So this development, if not tampered down, could have significant impact on global trade if cooler heads do not prevail.
Amazing, and that's with that's Middle East focused, and of course we have Strait of Malacca, South China Sea, and then the Taiwan Straits, all kind of very much wrapped up into U.S.-China relations and what happens in there, with Japan and the Philippines aligning more with the U.S. on defense issues. It's been, I'm cautiously optimistic that cooler heads will prevail and that part of the world will not take fire, but it is a head scratcher. Everyone I've talked to, everyone's watching that.
I agree. I think it's getting to be quite dangerous on the international trade front there. So hopefully cooler heads will prevail.
And of course, the shipping companies need no excuse to jack up shipping rates as well as insurance rates, right?
And even just the gas at the pump. I know right now in Wisconsin, gas prices are about $4.50 a gallon right now. And if the situations were to escalate, we could be looking at $10, $12, $13 a gallon, which is not good for the average American here.
That's right. It's a good thing you and I are runners, though it is hard to run back and forth with your grocery from the grocery store, right?
I agree. Well, I mean, it makes for a lean diet, that's for sure.
It sure does. So let's switch to Africa for our last. We got 3 or 4 minutes left. I know you do a fair amount of work in Africa. Your native country is Cameroon, of course, and you grew up in the U.S. But what do you see as happening in Africa? Of course, we can talk for hours about this, but I know you have a much better pulse on it than I do. So what is on your radar right now?
I actually think Africa is ready to soar. And I think the implementation of the first phase of the African Continental Free Trade Area in January 2021 is a major development that we should be watching very closely. The agreement was aimed at gradually abolishing cross-border trade and tariffs on about 90% of goods and services across the continent. And it is staged to be fully implemented by 2030. And once it's fully implemented, it has the potential to be the world's largest free trading bloc in the world, with a market size of about 1.3 billion people and a combined gross domestic product of about 2.5 trillion. And this is important because up until now, one of the major trade barriers for any foreign investors to doing business in Africa had been due to the varying degree of infrastructural capabilities, trade tariffs, and policies, and a number of local policies that differ from country to country. So one of the main goals of the agreement has been to sort of fix that problem, as well as also facilitate intra-trade within the countries of the continent, which has been a major issue, bearing in mind that for whatever reason, most African countries have traditionally chose to do business with, I guess you could say, some of their colonial masters than do business with their neighbors. So one of the goals of the African Continental Free Trade Area was to sort of fix that problem.
That's great. And what have you read anything about the infrastructure? I know that the people I've been reading have said African infrastructure is still an issue. Do you feel like, do you have any sense on a timeline for that, on when it will, kind of how far along is the infrastructure at this point, and where is it being built? Where are some of the easier markets to access, let's say, for companies that are on the outside?
From an infrastructure perspective, I think it varies, right, from country to country. Now, if you are a quote unquote middle economy country like Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, Morocco, the infrastructure is quite good. Now, if you were to be looking at doing business in, let's say, South Sudan, which I've been a few times for conferences, it's not so good. But but I think I think there's a lot of opportunities in Africa, just given the fact that it's got some of the fastest growing economies in the world. I guess prior to COVID-19, yes, but I think that you've got a lot of people entering the middle class. The consumer base is expanding. People are getting richer. So I think there's lots of opportunities for any American companies that are looking to invest in the continent.
That's great. Well, Ngosong, we're at time. I want to thank you so much for spending a few minutes with me. It's always fun to catch up. I know we work on projects together, but it's fun to spitball like this and me to hit you with some questions that keep me in the know, and hopefully our audience members enjoyed it as well.
Thank you so much.
And for those of you who are tuning in next week, we're going to have our colleague Shannon Brandau from Portugal on. She runs the China Boss newsletter, keeping pace with the latest China news. And she also is focusing on investors who want to buy real estate in Portugal, maybe as a path to a golden visa. So should be very interesting conversation. So we will see you next week.